About 20 years ago, I lived in a small town in Arizona. There wasn't a lot to do there, but the town had just finished building a small skate park, and my friends and I would spend a lot of time there skateboarding and just hanging out like young teenagers do. I wasn't old enough to drive at the time, so my parents would drop me and my friends off and come pick us up before the park closed, which was 9 p.m. We weren't like a lot of the troubled, cigarette-smoking kids who hung out at the skate park. We stayed out of trouble and played Tony Hawk's Pro Skater on our PlayStation. One day, when we were tired from skateboarding, we decided to walk around to the back side of the park and explore. The skate park was in the corner of a much larger public park, and behind the skate park was undeveloped land that was blocked by a chain-link fence. When we got to the fence, we noticed that someone had cut the bottom of it, which allowed us to push it open and crawl through the fence to the other side. We climbed through the fence, and as we started walking, we were met with 3 storm-drained tunnels. I'm not exactly sure how long they were, but they must have been at least 100 yards. Not knowing what was on the other side, we decided to walk through the tunnels and find out. Even though it was broad daylight outside, it was extremely dark inside the tunnel, with the exception of the light peeking in at the end. The walls were covered in graffiti, and we walked past lots of empty beer cans and other trash, which meant we weren't the only people to have walked through these tunnels. When we came out on the other side, we were near a shopping center with a lot of fast food restaurants and another public park. We realized that this was a shortcut to get there, albeit a little creepy because of the walk through the dark tunnel. We were young though, and didn't have cars, and it would take us almost 30 minutes to ride our skateboards to this area if we were to take public streets and sidewalks. Walking through the tunnel only took about 15 minutes, and because of this, we would frequently take this shortcut when we were bored or wanted to get something to eat. One evening, I was at the skate park with 2 of my friends who happened to be brothers. They were going on a family trip early the next day, so they had to leave the park earlier than me. Their mom asked me if I needed a ride home. I thanked her for the offer, but told her that I was going to keep skating by myself and that my mom was picking me up later that night. At some point, I got hungry. I decided I would walk through the tunnels to go get some food. I had never gone by myself, nor had I ever walked through the tunnels at night, but we had walked through them so many times at this point that I wasn't nervous about it. I walked to the back side of the park and climbed through the hole in the chain-link fence, like I had plenty of times before. I walked through the middle tunnel like my friends and I always did. But this time, I felt much different than any other time before. Not only was I alone, but it was 7:30 at night, and the sun was down, which meant there was no light at either end of the tunnel. It was so dark inside that I couldn't even see my own hand in front of my face. I walked slowly through the tunnel, slower than I'd ever walked through it before. I was hyper-focused on every sound, every crackle of broken glass beneath my feet, the echoes of my own footsteps off the concrete walls of the tunnel. I was about halfway through the tunnel when I felt something come over me and I stopped in my tracks. Even though I wasn't moving, I still heard footsteps. I spun around in fear to look behind me, but was quickly reminded that I couldn't see anything. And now, I wasn't sure if the footsteps were coming from behind me or in front of me. My heart started beating faster and I turned around and started walking quickly. I heard the footsteps again and in a panic, I started running, gripping my skateboard in my hands as hard as I could. All of a sudden, I felt something grab my arm from behind and yell out. I screamed out of pure fear and spun around, knocking myself and the person behind me to the ground. To this day, I remember the man's voice like it happened yesterday. He yelled, and I scrambled to collect myself and get to my feet. I couldn't see anything, but I was oriented enough to know that I had gotten turned around when we stumbled to the ground. I grabbed my skateboard and started running as fast as I could back towards the beginning of the tunnel. My heart was beating so fast and I was panting so loudly that I could barely hear anything else. but I still remember hearing the man's footsteps as he ran towards me. I was nearing the end of the tunnel when I suddenly tripped over a rock and flew to the ground. Somehow, I was still holding on to my skateboard, and when I fell to the ground, the combination of the skateboard's grip tape and the dirt and rocks below me ripped my pants and cut my leg open. The man that was chasing me was approaching, but he wasn't running anymore, and all I could hear were his footsteps walking slowly towards me, crunching the rocks beneath his feet. I was so terrified I couldn't even think, and I tried to get up, but my legs were in so much pain I could barely move. The footsteps were getting closer and closer, and I could hear the man panting, clearly out of breath. I propped myself on one knee, and fearing for my life, I grabbed onto the end of my skateboard with both hands and swung it into the darkness in front of me as hard as I could. I heard a loud thud as the wood from my skateboard hit the man in front of me, and I'll never forget the groan of pain he let out. I still couldn't see, but pulled back and swung again, this time sending the man to the ground in agony as he screamed in pain. The adrenaline was pumping through my veins, and I got up and sprinted towards the end of the tunnel, completely ignoring the pain I was in. I ran as fast as I could and never looked back, even once I got out of the tunnel. I launched myself towards the chain-link fence and crawled through, running towards the safety of the skate park. My pants were ripped, open at the knee, and my leg and hands were covered in blood from the scuffle. When my parents eventually showed up, I had to sheepishly explain what had happened and what I was doing. I was forbidden from returning to the skate park for a long time after that, and even when I was allowed to return, I never went through the tunnels again.